Like, subscribe, and hype the video. Also, leave a comment on any topics you want to hear about in the future. Okay, let's dive in. Right now, at the very edge of our solar system, something might be out there that we have never directly seen, never photographed, and never confirmed. But that several of the world's leading planetary scientists believe almost certainly exists based on the gravitational fingerprints it appears to be leaving on everything around it. A hidden planet, somewhere between 5 and 10 times the mass of Earth. So far from the Sun that it takes between 10,000 and 20,000 years to complete a single orbit. So dark and so distant that even our most powerful telescopes haven't been able to locate it directly yet, despite years of dedicated searching. It's called Planet 9, and the story of how scientists came to suspect it exists, what it might look like if we ever find it, and where it could have come from, is one of the most genuinely compelling unsolved mysteries in modern astronomy. Today, we're walking through all of it, the real science, the real evidence, and the real debate. And in our next episode, we're getting into the much wilder corner of this topic, rogue planets wandering through interstellar space, the ancient Nibiru myth that keeps resurfacing online, and what the actual evidence says about every version of this story. Stick around for that one. But first, let's understand what's actually happening at the edge of our own solar system. To understand Planet 9, you first need to understand what sits beyond Neptune, because most people's mental map of the solar system ends somewhere around Saturn's rings, and the real solar system extends vastly, almost incomprehensibly, farther than that. Beyond Neptune's orbit lies the Kuiper Belt, a wide, flattened region of space stretching from roughly 30 to 50 times Earth's distance from the Sun, packed with frozen objects, dwarf planets, and icy debris left over from the formation of the solar system. Pluto lives here, along with several other dwarf planets including Eris, Makemake, and Haumea, as well as countless smaller frozen bodies that haven't even been fully catalogued yet. Beyond the Kuiper Belt lies an even more distant and poorly understood region called the scattered disk, home to objects that have been gravitationally kicked into unusually elongated tilted orbits. And beyond even that, extending potentially thousands of times farther from the Sun than Earth's orbit, is the theoretical Oort cloud, a vast spherical shell of frozen objects believed to be the origin point of long-period comets that occasionally swing into the inner solar system. It's in the outer reaches of the Kuiper Belt and the scattered disk that something unusual has been catching astronomers' attention, and it's the kind of unusual that's hard to explain without something massive lurking further out, pulling on everything around it. Like, subscribe, and hype the video, and let's get into exactly what these astronomers actually found. In 2016, planetary scientists Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown at Caltech published a paper that reignited serious scientific interest in the possibility of an undiscovered large planet in our outer solar system. What they noticed, studying a set of distant Kuiper Belt objects with unusually elongated orbits, was a striking and statistically improbable pattern. 6 of these distant objects had their orbits clustered together in a way that wasn't randomly distributed around the Sun, the way you'd expect if their positions and orientations were purely the result of random gravitational interactions over billions of years. Instead, their orbits were aligned in roughly the same direction, tilted at roughly similar angles, grouped together in a configuration that the researchers calculated had only about a 1 in 10,000 chance of occurring by random coincidence alone. Their conclusion was that something large and distant was gravitationally shepherding these objects into this unusual alignment, essentially acting like an invisible hand, pulling these distant bodies into a pattern that couldn't be easily explained any other way. Based on the degree of clustering and the orbital characteristics of the affected objects, Batygin and Brown estimated the culprit was a planet somewhere between 5 and 10 times Earth's mass, orbiting the Sun at an average distance somewhere between 400 and 800 times the Earth-Sun distance, on a highly elliptical path that takes it between 10,000 and 20,000 years to complete one full orbit. Based on current models, Planet 9 wouldn't look anything like the gas giants closer to home, At its estimated mass and probable composition, most researchers think it would be classified as a mini Neptune or ice giant, a world composed primarily of rock and ice, with a thick hydrogen and helium atmosphere wrapped around it, similar in general type to Uranus and Neptune, but significantly smaller. From Planet 9's surface, assuming it has a surface, the Sun would appear not as the brilliant star we see from Earth, but as little more than an unusually bright point of light, roughly 1,000 times dimmer than what we experience here. Temperatures on its surface would be extraordinarily cold, likely dropping close to absolute zero, since it receives almost no solar warmth at its immense distance. If it exists and is eventually confirmed, Planet 9 would also carry the distinction of having the longest year of any planet in our solar system by an enormous margin, completing a single orbit in roughly the same span of time that separates us from the last major ice age on Earth. An entire planetary year, measured in the rise and fall of ice ages. Like, subscribe, and hype the video, and let's get into where this thing might actually have come from. If Planet 9 exists, its current position and orbital characteristics raise an obvious question. How did a planet this large end up this far from the Sun in the first place? The outer solar system, where Planet 9 supposedly resides, is so sparse in raw material that a planet of this mass couldn't have formed there from scratch. The building blocks simply aren't dense enough that far out. The leading explanations all involve Planet 9 originally forming much closer to the Sun, in the same general region where Uranus and Neptune formed, and then being gravitationally scattered outward during the chaotic early history of the solar system when the giant planets were migrating into their current orbits. Computer simulations of early solar system dynamics have consistently shown that close gravitational encounters between the giant planets during this migration phase could absolutely have flung a Neptune-sized world onto an extremely wide, elongated orbit, and that under the right conditions, the combined gravity of the rest of the solar system and passing stars in the young Sun's birth cluster could have gradually stabilized that wide orbit into something that would have persisted for billions of years without the planet being completely ejected into interstellar space. In other words, Planet 9's origin might be written directly into the same chaotic early history that gave our solar system its current shape, a planet that got knocked to the edge of the neighborhood, but not quite all the way out of it. This is the natural question, and it has a genuinely simple answer. Planet 9, if it exists, is extraordinarily faint, extraordinarily distant, and moves extraordinarily slowly across the sky. At its estimated distance from the Sun, Planet 9 would reflect almost no sunlight. It receives so little solar illumination that detecting it requires either catching it at a point in its orbit that happens to be relatively closer to the Sun, or using next-generation telescopes powerful enough to detect incredibly faint, slow-moving objects against a crowded background of stars and galaxies. Current sky survey instruments are right at the edge of where detection might be possible, but haven't yet confirmed anything matching Planet 9's predicted characteristics. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile, currently in its final commissioning stages, is widely considered the most promising near-term tool for either confirming or ruling out Planet 9 once it begins its full sky survey. Its combination of a massive mirror, wide field of view, and repeated deep imaging of the same sky regions makes it specifically well-suited for detecting slow-moving, faint objects exactly like a distant, undiscovered planet, and astronomers on both sides of the Planet 9 debate have agreed it should produce a definitive answer within the next several years of operation. So here's where the real science stands. A statistically significant clustering of distant Kuiper Belt objects that most naturally explained by a large undiscovered planet. A plausible formation and migration history consistent with what we know about the early solar system, and a next-generation telescope that should be able to confirm or rule it out within years. Not confirmed, not debunked, just one of the most compelling open questions in planetary science today. But there's another side to this story that goes in a very different direction, one that has been circulating online and in conspiracy communities for decades, long before any of this real science emerged, and that has its own very specific claims about a hidden planet and what it's going to do to Earth. In our next episode, we're getting into all of it: the Nibiru myth, rogue planets wandering through interstellar space, and what the actual evidence says about every version of these claims. Stick around for that one. Like, subscribe, and hype the video so you don't miss part 2, and let me know in the comments whether you think Planet 9 is actually out there. I'll see you in the next one.